Garth Brooks. Say what you want about the guy, but he had the 90s in a chokehold with his millions of records sold and his dozens of hit songs on the radio. I myself did not understand just how ginormous this guy was until I did some research. Garth Brooks has had 6 of his studio albums go diamond in the US. And all of this was in the span of like 7 years. To date, he has had even more diamond certified albums if you include his live albums and greatest hits compilations. Bands just don't do that kind of business anymore. And they really didn't do that kind of business back then either. Garth Brooks in the 90s had as much universal appeal as Coca-Cola. Much like Shania Twain, Garth Brooks was a country star that was able to cross over into the mainstream, garnering thousands of fans who probably wouldn't have otherwise even listened to country. Garth Brooks' stadium tours were things of legend and also raked in huge business from millions of eager fans. But then, in the year 1999, Garth Brooks decided to burn it all to the ground. He went emo. This is Train Records. Just kidding, this is Dancing with Ghosts.
There's no more waiting, holding out.
Yes, sirree, the barefooted man before you with the emo haircut is the one and only Garth Brooks. But he's not Garth Brooks. No. This is a character called Chris Gaines. Garth Brooks is merely the vessel in which Chris Gaines' spirit lives. This story is so fucked up. Try to stay with me here because this is a rocky and convoluted road we're about to go down. Okay. So in 1999, Garth Brooks decided he wanted to make a film based on a fictional rock singer who was emotionally conflicted over the stresses of being a famous rock star, or so the story goes. Garth Brooks would portray this rock star in the movie, and his name would be Chris Gaines. Brooks had a production company called Red Strokes Entertainment, and Paramount Pictures were licking their lips to make Garth's dream come true. The movie was to be called The Lamb and was to be released within the next year or so. Now, obviously, Garth Brooks' wheelhouse was in making pop country and selling out arenas, so the prospect of Garth Brooks all of a sudden becoming Nikki Sixx was a hard sell at best. Garth knew this, and in an attempt to win over favor from the fans for not only the movie, but the character himself, Garth dropped a pre-soundtrack called Chris Gaines' Greatest Hits, where he is completely in character as this Chris Gaines guy. Garth Brooks threw himself completely into this role and used his prestige in the music industry to land Chris Gaines as the musical guest for Saturday Night Live, and probably the most cringiest thing to come out of all this, VH1's Behind the Music did an entire episode on Chris Gaines and played the whole thing completely straight.
He was a rocker who liked fast cars and even faster women.
Sex. That's the greatest thing about being a musician.
It was so hard to watch, I only got a few minutes in and I had to turn it off. Like, everyone knows this is Garth Brooks. Like, what the fuck are you doing? If he's a fictional character you're going to be playing in a movie, why are you making a behind the music on him as if he's a real person when Garth Brooks has made it obvious that he's not? Already you can see this is a bizarre and confusing career move.
But it gets so much worse.
There have been other YouTube channels that have covered this Chris Gaines period of Garth Brooks' career. But I don't think any of those YouTube channels actually bought the CD. This, ladies and gentlemen, is when the cringe meter flies off the charts. We are not only treated to Chris Gaines' backstory, we get in-depth backstories to the meaning behind each and every single one of these songs, written in some of the worst cursive handwriting I've seen in some time. I never understood cursive handwriting when it comes to art. Is it supposed to make it look more regal and heartfelt? And I'm guessing we are to assume the person writing all of these little stories is the Chris Gaines character. So all of the stories are bullshit. Also, for an album that is supposed to be rock, these all sure sound like country music song titles to me. Songs like That's the Way I Remember It, Lost in You, Snow in July, Drifting Away, Way of the Girl, It Don't Matter to the Sun, Digging for Gold, My Love Tells Me So. Yeah, that sounds So rock, bro. I bet this record's gonna slap. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit and go back to the album title, Greatest Hits. You might be asking yourself, how does this dude have any hits if this is a Garth Brooks side project based on a character that doesn't yet exist, but for all intents and purposes is being marketed as a real artist who absolutely exists? Are you still with me? Okay, so imagine, if you will, an alternate reality where Chris Gaines actually exists. According to the liner notes, Chris Gaines was born in Australia but moved to Los Angeles when he was 5 years old. Chris dropped out of high school to pursue music, where he joined his best friend Tommy and Mark to form a band called Crush. Yeah, no, this is in no way ripping off INXS, but by any means. The band signed with Capitol Records in 1985 and released their self-titled debut album in 1986. Their song, My Love Tells Me So, was a smash and one of the year's most successful songs. But then wait, things aren't looking so good for Crush, because later that year, Tommy, the lead singer, dies in a plane crash. Oh my gosh.
Authorities believe that Tommy became disoriented in heavy weather over the New Mexico mountains. Tommy Levitz was dead at the age of 19, and Chris was beside himself with grief.
None of this is sounding cliche at all so far. So then Chris Gaines decides to go solo, and he puts out 4 albums: Straight Jacket, Fornicopia, and let's just talk about that album. Oh my God, that is. I want to be edgy. I'm trying so hard to convey my edginess. The name of the Fornicopia. You don't get much more Spinal Tap than that. But I am not joking when I say we are meant to take all of this dead ass seriously. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know who that guy is on all those album covers you just showed me, but that doesn't look like Garth Brooks or Chris Gaines. Well, it's not, you see. Garth Brooks hired a young actor to portray a younger Chris Gaines from the years of 1986 to 1992. So then you may also proceed to ask yourself, well, how is he going to tie all this together, because that guy looks nothing like emo Chris Gaines of modern day? Well, you see, according to the bio, Chris Gaines got into a violent single car crash that nearly ended his life. Chris spent 6 weeks in the hospital and over 2 years undergoing extensive plastic surgery on his face, shoulder, and hands.
According to Chris, accepting his newly altered appearance was a huge hurdle to overcome.
You live with your face for 25 years and then just have it totally reshaped. It's not an easy thing to get along with.
So that's why he looks like this now. Watch out, Stanley Kubrick. Garth Brooks' script writing game is about to put all of your movies to shame. So with Chris Gaines' new face, he goes on to release 2 more albums, Apostle, and probably my favorite album art of all time, Triangle. Can we please talk about this album cover? Bro, this looks like my depressed uncle just discovered Snapchat filters. Now, I know when they were coming up with these god-awful fake album covers, this kind of effect was still new, but good lord, even back then, someone should have said, Garth, you do want people to take this seriously, right? I love how in the center of the triangle is the little pouty lip hexagon, which goes on to form a soul patch vortex. And it is right here, ladies and gentlemen, where all Affliction t-shirts and True Religion jeans come from, this soul patch pouty lip vortex. So you see, these 4 solo albums plus his first band Crush's album is where all of these songs came from to form this lovely Greatest Hits album. Aren't you so glad you know that now? So Garth has created this whole robust universe that Chris Gaines lives in. And it's a very successful universe. For instance, Chris Gaines' first album, Straight Jacket, stayed on the Billboard charts for a record-breaking 224 weeks. That's pretty much all of his albums. They were all resounding successes according to his bio. So, what does this album actually sound like? Well, you've already heard a clip of one of the songs, the one and only song off this album to actually hit the real Billboard Top 40. As far as the rest of the songs, well, first of all, Garth Brooks is able to just turn his country twang on and off like a light switch, apparently. Which makes me wonder if the twang is even real to begin with. Country singers really lean into that twang to sell records, but I always thought it was a little exaggerated. Like, did Darius Rucker and Aaron Lewis ever have country twangs when they sang in their rock bands? No, they did not. Then they went country, and all of a sudden it's...
Heading down south to the thumbing my way in North Carolina.
But Garth went the opposite direction and now sounds like the sixth Backstreet Boy on this record. Also, according to Chris Gaines' lore, the songs on this greatest hits CD span pretty much over a decade. You have My Love Tells Me So, which was released in 1986, and then you have his last album, Triangle, which was released in 1996. And yet, the production value on all of these songs sounds exactly the same, almost as if they were all recorded at the same time in the same studio. You know, that's one thing that really pisses me off about this Garth Brooks thing. If he had been smart enough, he could have done some really cool stuff with this record. He could have recorded the 80s songs with 80s studio equipment and had it produced to sound like a song that would be played on the radio in the 80s. And then he could have produced the 90s songs differently as well. That would have been a really unique idea and would have made this feel like a real compilation of greatest hits. But instead, every single song on this album sounds like it came straight out of the year 1999, which was when the songs were actually written to begin with. Here's a quick review of the album. That's the way I remember it. Watered down 90s pop rock with no rock, has the vibe of Christian rock, but that's almost an insult to Christian rock, and that's really saying something. Lost in You. This is written like a 70s yacht rock song with modern 90s boy band production, tossing in as many lyrical cliches as possible along the way. Snow in July. Musically, this song almost sounds like a knockoff of the Peter Gabriel song Digging in the Dirt. Vocally, we have Garth Brooks doing his best Blue-Eyed Soul impersonation. The chorus kicks in with like 1,000 vocal overdubs and harmonies, which might be the only interesting part of the entire album, but overall it's still trash. Driftin' Away. Generic white guy R&B with generic lyrics. Way of the Girl. Generic white guy blues with some faux grit. Unsigned Letter, watered down Wallflowers song, which is already saying a lot because Wallflowers is pretty watered down as it is. It Don't Matter to the Sun. This is the most Garth Brooks sounding song on the entire album, and in the liner notes, he claims this song is a cover of a Ramsey Sellers song. Yeah, that artist does not exist. So now this fake artist is doing fake covers. Right now. Got some produced drums with this kind of distorted filter. Chris Gaines is doing some talk rapping, listing all of the problems that plague modern society, trying to be edgy, and then out of nowhere breaks into,
Come on, people now, smile on me, brother, everybody get together.
what in the actual fuck was that? Main Street, watered down Oasis. White Flag, generic white guy R&B song with some 90s edge. Digging for Gold, country/rock song with vocals that do not match. The song is about a gold digger. What a novel concept. Maybe. On this song, Chris Gaines/Garth Brooks tries their hand at ripping off the Beatles. Mellotron and everything. My Love Tells Me So. Mercifully, this is the last song on the album, and it's Garth Brooks' second attempt at a Beatles song. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is Garth Brooks ripping off the Beatles, or trying at least? But there's actually a very reasonable explanation for this. You see, Chris Gaines' old bandmate Tommy, you know, the one that died in the plane crash? Yeah, Chris explains in the liner notes that Tommy was a huge Beatles fan. So he was actually trying to sound like the Beatles on purpose to honor his dead friend. You would have known that had you actually read all the fucking illegible chicken scratch like I did. Again, I ask, why do I put myself through this shit? I know I want to do a video on Chris Gaines, but I can actually say that I not only own the CD, but have listened to it multiple times and have read every single one of those stupid fucking stories in the liner notes. There are Garth Brooks diehards who can't even claim that. I must get off to all of this in some sick way. The only positive thing I can say about the album is it's got that expensive, slick recording style that you would expect from a top-tier artist, and holy shit, look at all the people it took to make this fucking record. This is absolutely insane. You already have the core band who are all playing like multiple instruments, but then you have like 20 other people, including an orchestra. On top of that, a lot of these people are playing the same instruments as each other. Garth Brooks, acoustic guitar. Gordon Kenny, acoustic guitars. Tommy Sims, acoustic guitars. Why do you need 3 separate people to play this? But yeah, the album is completely derivative garbage. There's nothing all that new or experimental on this album. There is certainly nothing that resembles rock on this album. It's even weirder when you listen to the lyrics of the songs, knowing that this is a character and therefore there is absolutely no sincerity behind any of these vocals. It's different when Spinal Tap does it, because they are a parody band satirizing cock rock. It's different when the Gorillaz do it, because they're cartoon characters who have no association with Damon Albarn outside of the vocals. Garth Brooks created a character that was just a walking cliche. Everything about Chris Gaines, from his biography, to his look, to his lyrics, even down to the art style, was all just a mixture of cliches from various genres. Chris Gaines is Garth Brooks' idea of what an edgy rock guy would look and sound like, which just shows how shallow Garth's understanding of the rock world really is. This is why, to this day, Chris Gaines is seen as a big fucking joke. Garth didn't enter the rock space with enough respect and regard for the genre, and basically just made himself out to look like a fool. The album rightfully tanked, and the movie was never made. Garth went back to making country records, but never came close to recapturing the dominance he had in the 90s. Garth has gone on to release 7 albums since the Chris Gaines experiment, and none of them have come anywhere near the success of his first 7 albums. I don't believe the Chris Gaines thing necessarily had anything to do with that. The dude was, Garth speaking, was retired from music for like 8 years solid to like raise his kids and all that. And by the time he came back, country music had all but moved on. It happens. And I just learned a few days ago, apparently Garth Brooks is planning on actually making those 4 albums under the Chris Gaines moniker and releasing them because he apparently really loved that project. Oh, God. I think the only thing cringier than Chris Gaines is Garth Brooks. Until next time, have a good rest of your night.
Well, I guess it's official. We're now on Facebook. I really wasn't sure about this at the start. But then a friend of mine said something that just made all kinds of sense. She said, think of it more as a conversation. I like that. But I'm already finding out on my own is that it's wiping the walls out between you and me, and I really like that. It allows us into each other's worlds, or I guess in my case, the hotel room. When I think about things I want to post cool stuff, slick stuff, neat stuff. But most of the stuff I'm going to post is going to be raw stuff like this. Because it's just who I am. So if this is truly a conversation, then I say let the conversation begin.